So, how would you describe survival mode?
Yeah, me for most of my life. Just getting by, just getting through the day, not from the day, in a constant state of being tired. Always asking, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Never really feeling like I was living on purpose. It's exhausting, it's draining. You're not fun to be around. Energetically, you attract other things into your life that are not a good fit. So yeah, survival mode was me for most of my life.
Welcome to Survival Mode Disrupted, the podcast for those who are done performing, done people pleasing, and done living life on autopilot. I'm your host, Letitia, the Survival Mode Disruptor, and this is where we create disruptive, unapologetic transformations for those who are ready to exit survival mode and reclaim their power. Every episode is your permission slip to burn the rule book, break the cycle, and finally build a life that feels like yours. So let's disrupt everything that's holding you back and start living life on your own terms. This is your trigger warning. This podcast is raw. It is real and it doesn't sugarcoat what it means to survive trauma, abuse, mental health battles, or even the aftermath of living in survival mode for too damn long. What you hear on Survival Mode Disrupted includes unfiltered stories, graphic details, and a vulnerable truth that may trigger some of the audience. Please prioritize your emotional safety. If something feels too heavy, pause, breathe, come back when you're ready or not at all. Your healing is yours to honor. These episodes are based on lived experience, not therapy sessions or clinical advice. Listening does not replace mental health treatment or constitute a coach client relationship. If you're in crisis, please seek immediate help from a licensed professional or contact your local emergency services. This space is built with care, but it's also built for truth and built for disruption. Take what you need, leave the rest, and most of all, trust yourself. If this podcast speaks to your soul, you don't have to do this work alone. Feel free to join our free Facebook community for high achieving women ready to break cycles and heal out loud. Join us at Disrupting Survival Mode on Facebook, or grab the book that started this movement, Exiting Survival Mode, raw step by step guide to help you identify, release, and rebuild from the survival patterns that have been keeping you stuck. Hello, 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 and welcome back to another episode of Survival Mode Disrupted. I am your host, Letitia, the Survival Mode Disruptor, and today we have Sharlene with us. So, Sharlene, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello from the land of Oz, down under. It is cool down here, only 14 degrees. I've just turned 59. I'm heading on my way to 60. I label myself as a business strategist and a visual model architect. So I work with wellness practitioners, I work with coaches, I work with speakers to unpack the brilliance that is them and display it in visual models. So they've now got intellectual property that they can trademark, they can scale with it, they can license, they can franchise their business.
Lovely. I'm so excited to have you on today. Oh, well, I would love to hear the story to and through survival mode.
Mm. So I suppose they say a fish doesn't know water. I didn't even really know that I was not doing okay. I just didn't ever feel really amazing. I was in denial about pretty much everything in my life. Spent most of my time in a state of blaming everyone else for the predicament that I was in, and always had a huge level of excuses. So and living in a space of denial. So like on every level. I was not in a good space. But it wasn't until that one night in September 2011 that everything changed because that was Even though it was tragedy, it was my awakening. It was my realization that this is not okay. This is not how I wanted to live. This is not my life on purpose. That there has to be more. I don't know what it looks like, but there has to be more.
Can you tell us a bit about that night and that the tragedy you mentioned?
Yeah, I have to say there should be a trigger warning with this though, because I want to talk about something that I've visited myself. Look, in September 2011, I came home early from a birthday party and I was a little bit sort of happy with myself because I was sort of sober. And that was a really rare thing for me was to be sober because I had been an alcoholic for more than 3 decades. And I was living in that space of denial that I really had a problem. I was just that girl that had a few glasses of wine, but it really wasn't a few glasses of wine. It was 5 bottles a day. So it was a problem. I didn't see it as a problem. But that night I was a bit excited. I came home and want to let everyone know, particularly my son, my 17-year-old baby boy, hey, mum's home and I'm sort of sober. I knocked on his door to let him know that I was home, but he didn't answer. And I thought, oh, that's just odd. But you know what? He's probably gaming. So playing computer games and wearing those headsets that kids wear and just, hard at it because I figured that must be what it is. I tried to open the door, but the door was locked. And like, that's a weird thing in our house. We just didn't lock doors. We just didn't need to. Yes, there were locks on all the doors, but we didn't need to use them. So I thought that was strange. But 17-year-old teenage boy, I don't know. What could he be up to? So look, I asked my partner to go around the outside of the house and look through his bedroom window and get his attention and just make sure everything was okay. So I positioned myself so I could look out of the laundry. So I'd see my partner, but I couldn't look around the corner far enough to actually see what was happening inside my son's room. And that's when I knew there was something wrong. The My partner's face, all of the blood ran out. He had a look like a horror look on his face. I could not see what he could see. But with that, in just seconds, I ran to my son's door and with everything I had, I kicked that door down. And that's when we discovered that my beautiful baby boy, my 17-year-old baby boy, 1 week from his 18th birthday, had taken his own life. He had hung himself on the back of the door. And I tried for 15 long minutes to try to resuscitate him, all while praying that a miracle would happen, that I would be able to bring him back to life. I didn't even really know that I knew CPR, but I obviously did because I was doing it. My partner was on the phone to the ambulance, and the ambulance officers, they arrived and they had their giant hands like filled with all of this stuff. They were carrying all of this equipment and they rushed into Scott's room and they ushered me out to wait into the hallway. But I was still praying. I was still praying that they would be able to do the thing that I couldn't do, that they would be able to bring him back to life. And I did get an answer to my prayer, Letitia, that it wasn't the answer that I was looking for. That A few minutes later, when the ambulance officers came out of Scott's room, they looked at me. Now, I know they said things, but I couldn't hear their words. I could see their face, and that was enough. And I collapsed to the ground, still praying that there would still be another miracle. And that's when I heard it. One word, the answer to my prayer, that one word was forgive. It was loud, it was audible. I thought everyone could hear it, but that word was just for me. Later on, the ambulance officers asked me, do you want to come in and say your goodbyes? And I did. I wanted to say goodbye. And so I went into his room and I laid down on the ground and I rested my head on his shoulder. And I said, Mummy loves you, baby. And I forgive you for your choice. What I didn't understand until so much later is that me forgiving him for his choice was allowing me to heal at the speed of love. I took a lot longer to forgive myself, but I forgave him in that moment. And that put me on a trajectory to be able to not just help myself, but help other people around me. And that started a series of events. So later on that night, as I'm sitting on my giant armchair with my feet like tucked in underneath me, and I'm staring at my giant cup of coffee, I said, I'm not just going to survive this, I'm going to thrive through this. But I didn't even know what that looked like. Like, my life was a mess. I did not even know what thriving looked like. But what I had done is made the decision that I was going to live a thriving life. Now, it must have been an odd thing for a mother to say because the police officers wrote it down in their question sheets, and then I got called in and questioned on that afterwards. You know, it must be an odd thing for someone to say. I was thinking it, I didn't really realize that I was audibly saying it. But that was the second thing that happened that night, that now I've made a decision that I was going to live a different life, even though I didn't know what it looked like. And now, because I'd been in that state of forgiveness with my son, and I was now in a state of making that decision, then I was able to move forward at a different pace than other people around me. Like, even on that night and every night after that, other people had come to me for me to console them, not the other way around, which is how it ordinarily is in that environment. But they hadn't forgiven him. And some people still haven't forgiven him for his choice. So they're still holding themselves at that frequency of unforgiveness. So, like, that was that night. And then the very next day, nobody slept. Nobody slept, but we just lied in bed and stared at the ceiling. But the next day, when I got myself out of bed, I grabbed a spiral bound book and I just started to write out things that I was grateful for. So I understood, as a woman of faith, enough to go, you know what, I need to find a way to be grateful. I need to find a way to give thanks. So I just started writing out a gratitude journal. And I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. Now, you know what, I had a lot to be thankful for, but it wasn't all roses. That there was a space and time between the day that he died and the funeral that I was not okay on any level. Like, I was barely functioning as a human. And the only thing, but I still managed to find one thing to write down. The only thing that was written down on my gratitude journal was that the sun was shining, because that's it. I couldn't find anything else. But I've managed to keep that as a daily practice, and I actually do lots of different types of gratitude, and that has really made a huge difference for me to be able to realize, first of all, forgiveness. We need to be in a state of forgiveness. And for the listeners today, who do you need to forgive? Quite frequently, it's ourselves. And then decision. What decision do you need to make? What decision do you need to make? Remember the word decision. The word decision means to cut off and kill, right? And that, so think suicide, pesticide, that means to cut off and kill. So make that decision means to cut off and kill all other options. And now, as a recovered hoarder, can I tell you, I had years and years of indecision. I was surrounded by 33 cubic meters of indecision. And so that night, making that decision, even though there was a very long list of things that needed to change, right, just one tiny step at a time. Because the next list that I wrote is a list of what I want my life to look like. And that was a huge list that went on for pages and pages. And then once I'd finished that, then I was able to write, okay, what are the things that need to change for me to have the life that I want? Yeah. So those simple steps are what actually started my mind shift process. And now it's grown into a 5-step process to shift you from where you are to where you want to be. And this is what I talk about as a keynote speaker in schools and on platforms and corporates all over the place, to help people shift the way that they think.
Wow. That's an incredible story. And I love how you said you anchored into gratitude. I often talk on this podcast about whenever I hear someone mention gratitude, it's almost an indication of their level of healing. Because in order to get to a space where you aren't blaming, where you aren't projecting your disappointments, gratitude is required. But a lot of us, when we're in survival mode, we are in the blame game. We are projecting all of our disappointments onto the world. And when we can anchor into even just a single thing, like you mentioned, the sun was shining, right? Anchoring into a single thing that you can have gratitude for is so liberating, especially when we're dealing with tragedy, trauma, and learning how to navigate that. I'm curious. I mean, you talked about getting clarity on how you wanted your life to look, getting clarity on the things that you had to change in order to get to that place. So I'm curious, did you consciously get to that place, or was it one day like an aha moment? Oh my gosh, I'm here.
Uh, I'm still not there. Let
Okay.
that completely straight. Life is a journey. So when the next list that I wrote out of what I wanted my life to look like, it was very specific, like very, very specific. And then once I had a thread of what I wanted something to look like, say for instance, my environment, right? So remember this, I'm a chronic hoarder at that point in time, 33 cubic meters of stuff. I had a vision that I wanted to live like house and garden. Beautiful house, beautiful location. And, to this day, when I'm interviewed, the advertisers, the newspapers, they come here for the pictures. So, like, I do live in house and garden, which is just fantastic. But I had visualized, I'd written it down. I had, and but the life that I had lived up and that to that point was the furthest thing from that. Like, I wasn't experiencing that. I had made a decision. So, to answer your question, it's the shift process in its entirety, the 5 steps of shift that have got me from where I was to where I am. And my challenges were a lot more complicated than just being an alcoholic and being a hoarder. Also, OCD to the point of self-harm, suicide ideation, and also ADHD to the point of total distraction. So I like to consider myself as neurospicy, so a little bit different. And so there I had other challenges to overcome to transition between where I was and where I am now. And another one was to be this open to have these level of conversations because it just, you know what? If my son had been able to have a conversation about how he was feeling, then we would be having a different conversation today. So, this is why I do a lot of work in schools, teaching children how to speak with confidence, because I believe if they can have confident conversations, they can have different outcomes.
Mm, I agree with you immensely. And I want to talk about the future scripting a bit because it played a role in my healing as well. And I remember when I started my business, I had a business coach tell me to write down my ideal day. And at first, I thought this is such a load of bollocks. Like, why am I doing this? Give me some direction so I can make some money. But writing down my day just didn't make sense to me. And I remember the first time I did it, she challenged me to get deeper and gain more clarity on what these things look like. And that was 2019. 2023, there was this moment. I was living in Turkey. I had been traveling at that point for a year and a half. And I was on this like porch and I said to myself, oh my God, this is what I wrote down, right? And I hadn't recognized it before that point. But one of the things that I really focused on and got clarity was at the time I had just started homeschooling my kids. And I remember saying that if we were learning about Spain, I wanted to learn about Spain in Spain. I wanted the flexibility to be able to travel as I wanted to. I wanted to be able to take my children on amazing adventures and still be able to run my business, be able to create enough income to make this possible so that I wasn't choking myself when I wanted to step outside the box and create a different life for my children. And there I was that morning on this porch in Turkey, recognizing that I had created my ideal day and I had been living it for a year and a half without this reconciliation that it had actually come true. But what I learned from that aha moment was the importance of taking aligned action and really getting anchored into the things that we want out of life and making sure that we are acting in alignment. So when I talk about accident survival mode, when I work with clients to help them move beyond that space of just showing up and existing, one of the things that I do is that exercise, that ideal day exercise, because I want people to recognize that while The phases for accident survival mode, in my opinion, are self-awareness, reprogramming, and reinvention. And while a lot of the heavy lifting is done in the reprogramming stage, being able to challenge our narratives, to be able to realign with our core values, to be able to think beyond the anchors that have kept us stuck for a very long time, the reinvention piece is the liberating piece, right? Because we get to decide, despite what we know to be true about ourselves, that we can be different, that life can look differently. But it's important for us to make sure that once we write these things down, and future scripting is unbelievably possible and beautiful. It opens up our awareness and our possibilities immensely. But once we write these things down, we then have to be consciously checking, is this taking me closer to that ideal day that I want, or is it not? And I think sometimes there's a gap between future scripting and making it a reality simply because we don't anchor into that question, is this in alignment?
Absolutely. And that is a perfect segue to the shift process because the very first letter of the shift process is to see the big picture. So this was those pages and pages of me writing out what I wanted my life to look like. And I challenge people, even in a corporate space, what is the big picture that you're looking for? And that's the challenge for most of us. And that's also the challenge of most therapies to help you move from where you are to where you want to be. So, as a person who is neurospicy, mostly they're trying to get you to look at what's wrong with you right now and where do you want to go. But that doesn't work if you're neurospicy. What does work for us is if we can see a big picture and that energetically places a mark in a future space for us to be able to aim towards that. And then the next step of the shift process is H, hone in on reality. That's where you get very specific. That's where you get a coach or a mentor. That's where you get a therapist, join a group. That's where you get a business consult to see what you need to structure for your business. But you start with that, see the big picture of what's possible, then hone in on reality. So that's the first two letters. The third letter is I, and that's implement quick wins. This is my favorite because this is your own brain chemistry helping you move forward. So every time you implement a quick win, so that night I was staring at my giant cup of coffee that was going cold. I never drank coffee since then. Now I was an 8 cup a day girl because you need 8 cups of coffee to equate and balance out 5 bottles of wine. I know. So implement quick wins. What happens every time we do a quick win, we convince our brain, well, our brain chemistry convinces us that other change is possible. It gives us a serotonin hit. So implementing quick wins, every level, I love it. And that means it's just one step at a time, one step at a time. But as you say, heading in that direction of where it is that you want to go. Now, there's two more letters. Can I share them?
Absolutely.
The next letter is F in shift, and that is to focus in on the patterns. I didn't get to where I was just overnight. That took me years, decades to get into that mess, into that hot mess. And so what I wasn't doing wasn't I wasn't focusing on the patterns. So the best thing that I can think of for focusing on the patterns is journaling. For me, it works on every level because when you journal, the pictures, the words, they come off the page and they create the patterns and you can see it. Oh, look at that. Oh, look at my language. Oh, okay, that's not me. I see what's happening. I'm blaming. Yeah, so, but it wasn't until I started journaling and taking it really seriously that I could see the patterns. And focusing on the patterns isn't just your patterns, it's also family patterns. So my family had a history of suicide, but we weren't talking about it. I remember one day having a chat with mum about my journal and saying, oh, if I think about it, I had some questions about things when I was 38. And mum said, oh, well, that was the age that I was when I had my mental breakdown. When I left home. So my mum left the marital home because she had a nervous breakdown. And then we both looked at each other and mum said, oh, Nana was 38 when she took her own life. So look, here's this patterns repeats, and patterns repeat, but what's happening is families aren't talking about it. They keep these dirty little secrets. So I'm an advocate for families sitting down and having conversations so that we can bring this to the light and we can talk about it. We can see how things could be different. Yeah. And then the last letter is T. You'll love it. T is take massive imperfect action. So I'm a recovering perfectionist. I wouldn't make any action because it had to be perfect, and then I was just swamped down in indecision. So now I just take action, even if it's not the right action. I just generally head in the right direction, and I fail forward often, more often than not. But I'm learning, and I'm just keep heading in that direction. So our fear holds us in that state where we don't actually move. So that's the shift process. And I challenge our listeners today. Stop referring it to as mindset. Your mind is not set, your mind is malleable. So shift your language. Call it mind shift. You've shifted, yes? When we can do that, we can change our lives because when you change your language, you change your lives and you stop reprogramming yourself on a daily basis. It's not set. Stop calling it mindset.
I love this. And I want to circle back to implementing those small wins. One of the things that I learned, particularly in business, is to celebrate the small things. Like we tend to just glaze over, but like you said, it's that hit of serotonin, correct? No, is it serotonin?
Yes,
Dopamine?
serotonin.
Okay. One of those that hit. And a lot of us don't recognize that's actually where our confidence comes from. A lot of people think that we're born with confidence, like it's either I have it or I don't know. You get confidence by taking action and then celebrating the small gains that you get as a result. And then there's this desire to do more because now you have evidence that you can. But oftentimes we don't stop to celebrate those wins. We don't stop to recognize them either. And then we get caught up in this cycle of chasing our tail without recognizing how much we have actually accomplished as a result. So yeah, very key. I love that shift process. See the big picture, hone in on reality, implement this small wins, focus on the patterns, and that is, oh my gosh, that's so key because oftentimes we don't see how we're repeating things, right? Like I've spoken about this, and again, it goes back to business. When I started business, I recognized that I had been holding on to my mom's version of scarcity, my mom's version of poverty. And there was a point in time where I was going to invest in myself. And I remember mentioning it to my mom. I was like, oh, it costs like 5 grand. And she was like, oh no, we aren't spending that kind of money. And it actually brought me back to like reality. Like, wait a minute, it's not your money I'm spending, first of all. But if I don't learn how to invest in myself, I can't expect myself to move forward. But oftentimes we hold on to patterns that have been passed on generationally or culturally that we don't recognize are inhibiting our ability to really move forward. Yeah. There's so much that has to happen in order for us to move beyond survival mode. But as massive as the change sometimes has to be, it doesn't have to be like this constant uphill battle. If we can break down the steps and if we can celebrate our wins, if we can recognize how we're rewriting patterns and challenging them so that we can move ourselves forward.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I now I see why when I was on your podcast, you're like, girl, you're speaking my language. Like we are so aligned in that. And a lot of it comes down to our ability to just challenge what we've known often for decades, you know? So tell us a bit more about how you work with clients, how we can connect with you and find you online.
Oh, I love it. Look, the safest link is to find me on Linktree. So Sharlene Lynch Linktree, because the links change so frequently that if you just go to the website, you're not going to be up to date. So yeah, the best what I do on this planet is basically work with people like yourself, other wellness practitioners, other coaches, other speakers, and extract the brilliance that's inside of their mind and create the visual models that showcase their brilliance, that enables them to stand on stages and pitch, enables them to run masterclasses to bring people into their own proximity, enables them to, send sales brochures so that they can fully explain the brilliance that they are. I love it. It also means that you can now trademark and register and you can franchise and license your business and take it to another level. So most of my clients are at that state of needing another level of clarity to get them to the next level. And they're mostly at a space where they're looking for scale. So I love it. I love it. The best way to come and find out, is this something that I want to do? Do I want to create visual models for what it is that I bring? Or maybe you're asking, I don't have a lot of clarity, or maybe you've just got a mess. Maybe you've just got a message that's a mess and you're not sure how you can do something with this. Coming along to the masterclass, which is called Expert Authority, is a great way to find out, how can I turn my message or my mess into money? Basically, how can I make an impact? How can I make a difference for other people? How can I move forward with this? So I run them on a monthly basis, and you'll get the links pretty much all over social media, the website, but also on the link tree as well.
Okay, go great. Well, thank you so much for your time on Survival Mode Disrupted. But before we wrap it all up, one key takeaway for the audience to action.
You've got this. You've actually got this. Stop questioning it. Stop questioning it. You're wasting your time, effort, energy, and frequency by questioning it. You've got this. You're designed this way. I'd love you to change your language and change your life by referring to it as mind shift, and use the shift process so that you can transition from where you are to where you want to be.
Yes, you've got this, audience. Charlene, thank you so much for your time, and audience. Thank you for catching another episode of Survival Made Disrupted. I just want to remind you, you were not built to break, but you damn sure were not built to just survive. Disrupt the cycle, reclaim your life, and thrive on your own terms. And I will see you next week. Once again, thank you for joining another episode of Survival Mode Disrupted, hosted by the Survival Mode Disruptor, Letitia. You didn't land here by accident. This conversation, it probably cracked something open on purpose. Because survival mode isn't just a phase, it's a pattern, an identity, a prison masked as strength. But here's the truth. You're not broken, you're just unfinished. So if something stirred in you today, don't ignore it, don't numb it, move with it. And I want to once again invite you to join Disrupting Survival Mode, the Facebook community where healing is loud and messy and real. I also want to invite you to buy my book, The Survival Mode Action Plan, because your breakthrough deserves a blueprint. And if you felt seen today, be sure to share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Like, subscribe, and drop a review. That's how I amplify the voices that need to be heard. And remember, this isn't about fixing yourself. This is about finding yourself again beneath the rubble. Until next time, choose ease, choose power, choose you. This is Survival Made Disrupted. Let's keep shaking shit up.